Welcome to ConVerses. If you're just finding this, I strongly encourage you to watch the Gospel of the Covenant series first. There's important foundation built there that may be necessary to understand the concepts we'll be referencing as we study these apparently contradicting verses in the New Testament. Today, we're looking at another verse that many of us were raised on, Romans 3:28. Then we conclude a man to be justified by faith apart from works of the law. It is often used as one of the bedrocks of antinomian theology, but I ask you to hear me out and look at it closer with fresh eyes and newly established terminology. First, let's consider some embedded assumptions in most common interpretations. 1. Justified means made perfect or blameless, as in tamim. Number 2, faith means a mere mental agreement. And 3, works of the law means any and all actions of obedience of the Torah or covenant instruction. Now, having some background on these terms in the previous videos, you may start to question the presumed meaning of this verse. But before we dive into it, let's compare it to another well-known counterpart. James 2. Are you able to know, O vain man, that faith apart from works is dead? You see that a person is justified by works and not faith alone. Here we have two very opposing ideas, even directly contrary. Paul and James seem to be in distinct different camps on this issue, and the apparent contradiction is this. Paul is a Jesus plus nothing theologian that teaches he did away with the law for the Gentiles, while James is a legalist that teaches a works-based gospel to the Jews. Just remember, James's real name is Jacob, and was changed by King James of England to sound more English. I'll still use James so we're not confused, but consider how much history has done to separate us from the Hebraic heart of the Bible, which is why we need to learn its full context. And we're going to start with the meaning of justified. Now, it's important that you've watched the Gospel Part 3 video where I walk through the definition of righteousness, which is directly related to justification. In Hebrew, righteous is tzedek, and justified is hitzdik, a form of the same root that means caused to be made righteous. The Greek word Paul uses is dikaio, and means the very same thing. But let's clarify what it doesn't mean. Being justified does not change your heart intention to be morally upright or pure. It does not mean whatever you do now is made to be legal. And it does not remove all the laws so any and all actions are now legal by omission. And it does not mean someone else can be legal for you so you can remain illegal. Now, hopefully you see where I'm going with this. And in the Gospel Part 3 video, I use an analogy of the DMV, where your legal access to the roads is elevated to a federal agency that issues universal licenses. This is a concept of justified that we can proceed with. Paul is stating in Romans 3 that your required legality for access into the covenant of Adonai is achieved through Yeshua's offering and priestly mediation, now in heaven. Just like the federal agent in D.C., it has been elevated from a physical operation where you used to have to appear in person and continuously renew your license in front of a human agent at a transactional office, just as the specific laws of the Levitical priesthood and sacrifices defined how to maintain covenantal status in the temple. But now the faith of a covenanted member of Israel is needed to confess your representative sin onto that heaven-provided eternal Lamb, according to the supreme legality of Adonai's heavenly administration. So does this mean that all the instructions of Elohim for a legal life in his administration are ended? That would be like saying you receive a universal federal license to drive and then assume there's no more traffic laws in your state. You would quickly lose your privilege to drive. In the same way, Paul is declaring the access to be made legally right in covenant is now provided apart from these works of the law, or specific Torah instructions of the previous earthly administration of Levitical mediation and animal blood sacrifice. This does not mean all legality is afforded while doing away with all of the terms of the covenant. This is where James provides clarification for a coherent Hebraic audience, because biblically literate Israelites would know faith is not a mental agreement, it is comprehensive hearing and doing, just as Paul agrees in Romans 2. For not the hearers of the Torah are righteous with Elohim, but the doers of the Torah will be justified. Take a second to register what Paul, yes, the same Paul, is clearly stating. The doers of the Torah will be kept legally right in covenant. James is picking up on this very idea of justification, or legal living, that requires the obedience of covenant terms. You are not in good legal standing if you merely confess by faith for your access into the covenant, and then purposely defy the expectations of your new citizenship. James, or Jacob, knows that walking out the instructions of the kingdom proves that you are of the kingdom. In other words, the whole physical world hasn't been elevated into the spiritual, the realm of heaven, just because the tabernacle service returned to its source, the spiritual priesthood. Just as all the physical instructions for life haven't been removed either. Since we're still living in a physical world, which is why both Deuteronomy 30 and Matthew 5 agree as long as you're standing on ground and there's sky overhead, the Torah is our rules of the road. To drive home this point, look at Romans 3:25. Yeshua, whom Elohim set as a propitiation through faith in his blood as a demonstration of his righteousness. The word propitiation is a big fancy word with self-imposed meaning, but in Greek the word hilasterion is used in the Septuagint for the Hebrew ha-kaporet, which is the covering of the Ark of the Covenant. So Paul is directly connecting what was being accomplished from the acceptance of blood on the ark with the presence of Adonai in the Holy of Holies to Yeshua's function as achieving legal acceptance in the same manner. So restated, Yeshua, whom Elohim set as the covenant covering of the ark, through faith in his blood to show his righteousness. Verse 26, in this current time. Literally, in this restored priestly administration of heaven. You see how that makes a little more sense? And to quickly repair the troublesome English translations of the rest of this verse, it should be rendered like this. To show his righteousness, that's Elohim's legal approval, in how he removed the sins in the past, via blood on the ark, by withholding judgment of sin, and now showing his legal approval in this current time, which he makes legally right for the one who puts faith in Yeshua as a God-accepted blood covering. Also, the phrase in the NIV, because he had left the sins committed beforehand unpunished, is a complete fabrication. It's not in the Greek manuscripts. Now, is this sin-covering provision of Yeshua offered so that we can tear down the entire construct of God instruction for living? Just listen to Paul's answer to this assumption a few verses later in Romans 3:31. Do we then nullify the Torah by faith? May it never be. Instead, we establish the Torah. You see, Paul clarifies that though we come into covenant by faith in a spiritual offering rather than a physical one, this doesn't make the rest of the Torah instruction defunct. James picks up on this by using Abraham as his example. Do you want to be shown, you foolish person, that faith apart from deeds is useless? Was not Abraham our father justified by deeds when he offered up his son Isaac on the altar? You see that faith was active along with his deeds, and faith was completed by his deeds. Abraham was given access into Adonai's covenant through a trusted belief in his provision of entrance. Then he established the covenant through his obedience, as shown in Genesis 26. I will establish the oath that I swore to Abraham, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my Torah. So in the words of James, Abraham was justified by his deeds, because faithfully obeying his covenant terms caused him to remain in good legal standing according to Adonai, who is the covenant maker. Paul clarifies for incoming foreigners that we can't enter the good legal standing alone by our own deeds or Levitical acts on the altar or human religious authority. But we certainly must continue in allegiance to Adonai's kingdom authority by walking according to these life-giving instructions of that kingdom, the very ones that Yeshua lived out perfectly to model for us. So, he was justified by his actions in James 2 is the same as the doers of the Torah will be justified in Romans 2. Paul and Jacob agree. When full context in the whole Bible is considered together, there is no contradiction. Paul is a Jesus equals covenant access theologian that teaches he is the only way of spiritual purification which allows the presence of God's Spirit with you, which will conform your heart to desire to keep the law of God, for the Gentiles and Jews who want to live in the kingdom of heaven. While James is a literalist that teaches a Torah-based gospel to show how true Hebrew faith is the actions that prove your trust in Adonai's covenant offering. Now let's revisit the corrected theological assumptions. 1. Justified means caused to be in right legal standing according to Adonai's covenant, which allows the Spirit to guide your heart to become tamim, which is perfect or blameless in intention. 2. Faith means trusting Adonai's covenant terms and its following action. 3. Works of the law in most of Paul's contexts mean actions of the Levitical portions of the Torah that we can no longer legally take part in, or the rote obedience of Torah without a purified heart. But that's enough to consider for now. I encourage you to share this and study it with trusted seekers of the Word, and to subscribe to catch the next episode. Until next time, let's pray for the mercy of Adonai to open our eyes to His truth, and for the courage to walk in it. Shalom.